yourself. Are you ready? Welcome to The Shift.
Hello, I'm Ed Montgomery. You are listening to The Shift. You are not only live here on the station, but you're also live on Facebook. And so if you want to go to Facebook, you can watch what we're doing right here. I've got a Facebook feed going on personally, but I'm getting ready to come off that feed in just a little while, and we're going to be just on KTSUradio.com. So you'll be able to watch that feed as well as listen to this show. You are not going to want to turn this dial. You're going to want to stay on this station today, because today we're going to be talking about abuse. We're going to be talking about domestic violence. We're going to be talking about how women feel, what's going on in their minds, what's going on when things happen that hurt. So you're going to want to tell your friends. They're going to want to tune in. They're going to want to just, if you got to get off from the phone, because I know many of you are listening by your telephones, if you want to get off the phone, call your friends. Come back, I'm going to give you the opportunity to be able to do it. You have time enough to do it, because this is the subject we're going to talk about. Whenever you see 5 women, one of them has experienced domestic violence. 1 out of 5 women, and another statistic is 1 out of 71 men deal with some form of abuse. We're in a generation, we're in a world where we are constantly being bombarded by things that are happening to people and in their lives that are hurting them. How are they crippling them? How many need crutches? Some are saying, well, it doesn't bother me. It does. I don't. I can get past it. I get over it. And then years pass, and they begin to realize, maybe I can't get over it. Maybe I'm out here suffering alone. But we're going to tell you today that you are not alone, and that you are not by yourself. What happens in our world and in our country is we have a tendency to turn our heads and act like abuse and domestic violence does not exist. We know it does, but then we don't want to talk about it. But when we don't talk, we don't heal. When we don't express, we don't lift. This is what this show is about. Shift is about changing our consciousness. When you keep the same consciousness that created the problem, then you never change the problem. But if you can change your consciousness or shift your consciousness, you are on your way to solving that problem. It's like a Rubik's Cube. We're constantly twisting it so we can get the perfect size, but unfortunately life is not a Rubik's Cube. Unless you just really know the secret of getting all of those sides the same color. Every time you shift one, it's going to shift the other. But then again, life is not a Rubik's Cube. Things are not always going to be perfect. We have to learn how to live with things in the midst of imperfection. But today, we're not sweeping it up under the rug. We're going to talk. As a matter of fact, I'm going to ask our callers. We're not going to be calling in probably for till about the latter half of the show. And I'm going to ask you that when you do call, that you have questions, because I've got some experts today, and I've got some people who are here that are going to help me talk about this subject. And I'm looking forward to it. I've got Pam Hewlett. I've got Sonia here with me. And if you don't know these names, you will know these names by the time we get through with this. So listen, don't you go away. On the other side of this space, we're going to be talking about something I believe that you're going to not only want to hear, you got to hear. Tell your friends. Tune in. today we're talking about a subject that's affecting everybody's life. But now it's about to change. You're listening to KTSU 90.9 FM, your community station. Keep listening. See you on the other side of this.
Ladies, we're gonna get you some headsets because you once the microphones
Thank
come
you.
on, you can hear me.
Let it go to the next
Except,
screen.
so we're gonna get you some headsets.
The Shift with Ed Montgomery will be right back on your number one source for jazz and more on KTSU 90.9, your community station, the heart and soul of Houston.
This is your KTSU inspirational moment.
Words are the single most powerful force available to humanity. We can choose to use this force constructively with words of encouragement, or destructively using words of despair. Words
Sonia, what's
have
your last name?
energy and power with the ability to help, heal,
Sonia, what's your
injure,
last name?
hurt,
Last name?
harm,
Corrales.
humiliate,
Corrales.
and to humble.
Corrales.
Okay, correct.
Educate yourself on the power
think
of
of
your
corral.
words,
Corral,
because your
yes.
words
Okay.
have power. This is your KTSU inspirational moment with Afridi Ali, the great coach, on your community station, 90.9.
Welcome to The Shift.
All right, I'm back. Thank you so much for you're listening to The Shift. And I've got Sonia Corrales with me. I have got Pam Hewlett with me, and they are here from where, ladies?
The Houston Area Women's Center.
Houston Area Women's Center. And they're going to be talking, we're going to be talking about abuse. We're going to be talking about domestic violence. We're going to be talking about where women go, what they can do. First of all, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
And tell me about the Houston Area Women's Center. Tell me about it.
I'll be happy to.
Okay.
The Houston Area Women's Center works to end domestic and sexual violence and supports all in building safe and healthy lives through advocacy, counseling, supportive services, and a shelter. We also have different services that we provide clients throughout the city of Houston. We are the only emergency shelter within the Houston city limits available to survivors of domestic and sexual violence. It's a 120-bed residential facility located in an undisclosed location.
Pam, let me see, 120 beds?
Yes.
So it's not just a place where women just call. You're talking about this is a center where full service they can
yes, it's
call, go, or
absolutely. It's a full-service residential facility. We have counseling and advocacy there. We have housing. We also provide services such as job placement. And we have counseling services for individuals as well as group.
let me ask you a question. And either one of you all, and let me ask Sonia, I know that you are, what do you do there? You've been, and while we were off the air, I'm going to tell everybody, you've probably been there forever because it's over 40 years that it's been here in Houston. What do you do there?
So thank you for having us on the show. This is an important topic to talk about, so I appreciate that. So the Houston Area Women's Center, I've been there for 26 years. And as you indicated, we've been around, Houston Area Women's Center has been around since 1977. So we've been doing this work for a very long time. But the Houston Area Women's Center, I oversee all the programs. So that includes our residential campus that Pam Hewitt was talking about, but also our counseling and education services over at our other buildings. So we have two buildings. One of them is our residential campus, and then the other one is our counseling and education building, where no one lives, but they can access services, as Pam was talking about, counseling, advocacy. We have a children's court services program. We have housing. We have case management for adults and children. And we know that domestic violence impacts mostly women, but it also impacts men. One important program that is important to talk about, and I'm sure we'll get to it, is our community education and violence prevention. The prevention, of course, is key to ending both domestic and sexual violence, and so we go out in the community and provide educational services to anyone. So that includes youth, that includes anyone out in the community. It also includes our professional community. And what I mean by that is people who are perhaps in law enforcement, judges, or schools like the Texas Southern, for example, who are maybe in the social work program, or faculty in elementary schools and middle schools, social workers, anyone who will listen to us, because as you indicated in your monologue, this is not just the problem of the person who is impacted by it, right?
So
it impacts entire communities.
Let me ask you a question. Take a woman who would make a call. What would that call be like if she were to make a call to the Houston Area Women's Center? What would that call be? Why would she call that number?
There could be a variety of reasons that she calls us. Primarily, we get calls on our hotline. Approximately 33,000 calls per year we get on our hotline, and that's the domestic violence hotline. We also receive about 3,600 calls on our sexual assault line. But the typical call could be, they could be making a decision to leave their situation. They could be making a decision whether or not this is the right thing for them and their children, or they could just be calling to find out what our services are. How do we support the survivors in the community? And I'm going to let Sonia kind of give us a typical example of what a call could be like.
Okay.
So, as Pam indicated, somebody could be ready to leave a situation which could mean that maybe they are thinking that they've identified that they might be in a domestic violence situation. But we also get those calls where people just don't know, right? People don't know that they might potentially be in a domestic violence situation. So a call may be, I'm calling because I heard that, you might provide some services and I just want information. Or I'm calling for a friend, or it's a family who might be calling for a family member. So a lot of times it starts out that way. And so our advocates, or hotline counselors as we call them, do is they provide what we call an assessment. So we talk to that caller and assess for any kind of violence. So
you're saying that caller might be calling and saying, I'm calling about my friend or my sister, and actually they may be calling about themselves.
Absolutely. It could be both. I mean, they could be calling about themselves, and maybe they hang up that first time and then call back. Or it could really truly be a friend or a family calling on behalf of someone that they know is hurting, and that they want information about how they can get help. And I think that that's very important too, because as we're talking about this, we know that domestic violence impacts not only that survivor, but impacts the friends and the family, the children. It impacts the entire community. So it's important that we all get information and get education on what domestic violence is. So a lot of times it's that person calling, wanting information. Could turn out that that they find out in that phone call that they in fact are being controlled, or in a relationship where there's abuse. And abuse can take many forms.
Tell me about the forms of abuse.
So abuse can, or domestic violence, one important thing to talk about is that it's a pattern of coercing and controlling behaviors with one person doing it to another.
Physical?
It could be physical. We know that domestic violence, for a lot of times people think that domestic violence is only physical, but it also includes emotional abuse. It includes psychological abuse. It includes...
Give me an example of emotional abuse.
So emotional abuse can be that somebody is putting you down every day. You're ugly, you're worthless, those kinds of things. But remember, it's a pattern of behavior, so it may not necessarily start out that way. Another thing that we know with domestic violence within that is isolation, right? So somebody who begins to isolate you from friends and family is part of that emotional abuse as well.
Like just taking your cell phone and cutting you off from your family, your relatives.
Absolutely. That's a form of abuse as well. Financial abuse is one of the biggest things that we hear.
What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is when a person is in a relationship and they don't have access to any of the finances. So that person may work, but then they have to turn their money over, to the person who says that they're controlling all of the finances, or they may not be allowed to work. Is another form of abuse. A person who could be in a relationship and they're not given any money at all. Maybe they might be given money to go buy groceries, for example. But then when they come back, the receipt is checked to make sure that they spent money on the groceries. And so those are forms of abuse. The other thing is, when we think of economic abuse, we also think about somebody who may not be allowed to go to school to further their education, because in the future they may be able to make more money. Absolutely. This is
you hear this?
Yes,
Every day.
This is one of the number one things is the financial abuse piece. Number one reason why people may not leave a violent relationship, and number one reason that people go back. So I think that this is an important issue to talk about. Other forms include sexual abuse, somebody who coerces someone, to have relationships when they do not want to, when they do not consent.
I'm going to that sexual abuse in a minute, because that's a subject within its own. I wanted to backtrack just a couple of inches here, because what I'm hearing is several things that seem to keep people locked up or isolated or keeps them away. No access to money. Keep people as ignorant as possible, to just keep them totally away from information, and family and friends. And I think when you start isolating just those three alone, how lonely can you feel?
I think very lonely when you think about the fact that those things really have an impact on you on a day-to-day basis. You really feel like you are alone. And so what we try to do is obviously make sure people know that we are here for them, that they are not alone, and that the services that we provide allows them to begin to build that financial independence that they need.
So that's one of the reasons they need to call, I guess, because you may not know all the signs, and by the time you're deep into this, somebody's got their foot on your neck almost. They've got control of you for some reason. I think that's what it sounds like to me. So.
Yes, absolutely. I think you set the tone in terms of what domestic violence and interpersonal violence, a lot of times or intimate personal violence as we refer to it, is that one person is controlling, manipulating, and coercing the other person. And I think that happens over a period of time. So I think a lot of times when people are in a situation where there's violence, and maybe there's no physical violence, that they may not recognize that they're in that situation. And as you indicated, the things that keep somebody in are what we call barriers, right? So it could be the isolation. So don't worry about it. It starts out with, you only need me, we need each other kind of thing, and then it evolves into you don't have any friends, you can't talk to your friends or family, your phone is being controlled, you're being tracked. Technology plays a critical role in domestic violence as well.
Now, we've been seeing, I think on the news, we're seeing so much about older men, underage girls, and we know there's sexual abuse that we see and that we hear about on television, on radio. How much violence is connected to sexual abuse? Is it just mental, or is it also physical? If I'm asking the right question.
Yeah, so one of the things that we know, and what we refer to as what you were just talking about, is of course sex trafficking, right? Sex trafficking is something that we have seen at least as long as I've been at the Houston Area Women's Center, which has been over 26 years. So it's not anything new. I think one of the things that we know, or that we see, is that it's happening in the media, more often. So there's more awareness to what might be happening in the community. So sex trafficking is very real. It happens both here domestically, and what I mean by that is in the U.S., and then it happens internationally, where young women or women are being trafficked from other countries.
Now, and I wanted to get to that whole age thing, because there's another thing that I wanted to ask, and I've got people maybe texting. And by the way, if you want to text, you can text your questions to us at 713-313-4354. That's 713-313-4354. I'm going to be opening up the phone lines in about 10 or 15 minutes, but you can still text those questions right now. I'm sure somebody will give me those texts, and we'll try to ask that question. Young girls, one of the things I was reading is that a lot of the abuse, the victimization, takes place by someone you know. It's not always a stranger, but 40 to 51% of the time, if not more than that, it's from somebody, a neighbor, somebody, a friend, or a friend of a friend, or a relative, somebody that you know. Is that true? Is that how it works? Or?
That is absolutely correct, and I think if we want to take some messages out of today, I think that that's one of the more important messages, is that 1.3 million women are in domestic violence situations in America. And so that's a significant amount. 1 out of every 3 women will be sexually assaulted. 1 out of every 7 to 10 men will be sexually assaulted. The majority of times, the most dangerous places in your own home. And I think that that's one message to take away. Sexual abuse, it's the same thing. So you're a person who is in a domestic violence situation, the most dangerous place is in your own home, because the person who's abusing you is a person who you are in an intimate relationship with, and it's typically your partner. It could be a boyfriend, it could be your husband, it could be somebody who is your intimate partner. With sexual abuse, it's the same thing. The majority of the time, sexual abuse happens by somebody who is known to that survivor. Whether you're a child, whether you're a teen, whether you're an adult, it is somebody that is known to you. In our Children's Court Services program, for example, we provide legal support, and this is criminal justice support. And these are all cases that are going through the criminal justice system where kids or children have been either victims of abuse or have witnessed abuse. The majority of the time, they've been sexually abused, and it's by somebody who is known to them, whether it was a parent, a grandparent, an uncle, a family member, or neighbor, somebody who was a close friend of the family.
I was curious, and you said something about a person who is a boyfriend or a husband or partner, because some people say, well, that wasn't sexual abuse, that was sex. And I'm curious, where is that? What is that line, and how is it looked at? Because one person will say one thing, one person will say the other thing. Listen, you tell your friends, get on the radio, go to KTSU, turn on this station, or you can go to ktsradio.com and you can catch us live, because we're talking about domestic violence, we're talking about sexual abuse, we're talking about some things that are necessary. You don't talk, you don't hear. I'll see you on the other side of this space.
Ed Montgomery will be right back on your #1 source for
Ladies.
jazz and more
Ladies.
on KTSU
You are good.
90.9.
Baby, y'all
your
putting some
community
information
station.
out there.
Ladies, you're good.
And soul
People-
of Houston.
People don't always know
A
what to
continuing
ask.
business supporter of
They want
KTSU
you
FM
to ask
is
those
Bayway
questions.
Chevrolet. Bayway
But
Chevrolet
you
is in
are
downtown
handling
Fairfield.
these questions. You
5719
are.
West Broadway Street,
Who?
5 minutes from 288 and Beltway 8. Bayway Chevrolet offers the new and pre-owned models of the Camaro, Traverse, Equinox, Tahoe, and Cruise. Their hours of operation are Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. For special financing, Antonio James, 832-416-6082, 832-416-6082. Bayway Auto Group,
But it's consent.
supporting
If you do
programming
not give
on
your consent
KTSU
to
90.9
have sex,
FM.
then it's sexual abuse.
Join in on the conversation. Call
time is it?
713-313-4354. That's 713-313-4354.
Take a call.
Oh my goodness, we've been talking about this. We've been deep in this conversation, and I know callers. I love you all so much. I forgot you all were there, but these calls been backed up. Listen, I got a call online right now. Hello, caller. You're live. What's on your mind? Hello, caller. You're live. You're on the air. They may not know they're on the air. Hello. Okay, gotta let it go. You can always call back if you miss it. Also remember, you got an 8-second delay. So if you hear me talking to you, while we're sitting here, I asked a question just before this break about the difference. People will say that's abuse. People say, well, that's just sex. What are you talking about? And you'll have people arguing about things. What's the difference here?
Well, I think it's consent.
Okay.
As we talked just a few minutes ago, when you're in a relationship, you really consent to whether or not you're going to have sex with that individual. But sometimes that can happen, even abuse can happen in a relationship, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, a marriage, abuse can still happen. So there's that line of consent.
I think we don't think of it that way, but all of it, any love relationship is consent. It's a giving of ourselves to somebody else. It's not a taking of something. Donna.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. How did you get a microphone?
I know, right? I have to read this text.
Yes.
You got a text message.
Yes.
And then you have a caller.
Okay.
Text message says, I am so glad she spoke on financial aspect. I was married for 20 years and I never realized I was in an abusive situation. He worked and never paid bills. He was trying to destroy me financially. Everything was in my name because he made sure his name wasn't attached to anything.
Ladies, this is what you also do. This is the counseling you do, isn't it?
Absolutely. Sonia, can you talk a little bit about the counseling that we do for not only individuals but the groups as well?
Absolutely. I think, one of the things that I wanted to just say is recognize the person who texted in about the financial abuse, because financial abuse is, again, one of the number one reasons that people stay in a relationship, or a barrier of leaving, right, in a relationship. But one of the things that we do at the Houston Area Women's Center is provide support through counseling. And that's either individual counseling or support groups. So anyone who is a survivor of sexual abuse or is a survivor of domestic violence can come to the Houston Area Women's Center and receive counseling in a support setting like a group.
And not have to feel that they're isolated. They can just be themselves.
Absolutely, and I think that you hit the key word, and that's isolation. One of the things that we know that happens in domestic violence situations is this idea that that isolation is happening. So one person is isolating their that survivor from everybody else. And so one of the things that we want them to know when they come to counseling is that they are not alone, that you're not the only one that is going through this. Help is available, and that we're going to help you through this. We're going to help you develop that support system. Now, that support system is not just the Houston Area Women's Center, but it's building that support system of friends and family that person has.
That word right there, friends. Hold on. Do I still have that call, by the way?
No, sir.
I lost it. Okay. You said something about friends. How important is friendship? Somebody that you can just tell the truth to. Do women have people that they really can talk to and say, listen, I'm going through this?
Absolutely, they do. Part of the healing process and part of really being able to cope with domestic violence and sexual assault is really being able to talk with someone about it, whether it is a friend, someone that you put your trust in, someone that is your confidant, someone that really understands who you are, and that gives you that ability to want to talk to that individual. It's not about judging what the person is saying. It's really more about just being that listener, being that shoulder that they need. And fortunately, we try to make sure that occurs because you want to have that support system. As Sonia just said, you want to have family, you want to have friends that will allow you to express what's going on, number one, but number two, help you to get that particular help that you need.
Pam, or Sonia, either one of you can answer this particular question. What is it when people tell you or may tell a woman that maybe you're causing the problem in the home? Maybe he's not the reason or they're not the reason, or maybe the reason you feel this way sexually is because you're the one, you're being very provocative, you're causing the problem. How do you handle that? What do you say?
So one of the things that we know about domestic violence is that a person is blamed, right, for the abuse. Whether it's the person who is abusing them, blaming them for the abuse, or you're doing this to cause it. If you just didn't do this, then I wouldn't, hit you, or I wouldn't tell you these things. And so that's one of the things that contributes to somebody not coming forward, because they're afraid that somehow it is their fault, or that they're not going to be believed. And then we have the friends and family. So the friends and family are dealing with their own issues, but remember, if people believe a lot of the myths that are associated with domestic violence, then that means friends and family believe them too. So a lot of times,
what's one of the myths?
That somehow you're causing the domestic violence, or that you want it, or that you like it, that it's your fault, that if you didn't want to be in this relationship, then you would just get out. And so I think that's an important thing to talk about when we're talking about friends and family. And we put it very simply. We look at it as the 3 R's, and so people can remember. So how do you recognize abuse? So getting informed. That's one of the R's. So recognition. How do you recognize it? What does it look like? What does abuse look like? And then how do you respond to it? What do you say to somebody who might be in a relationship that is abusive, that you could potentially, you're recognizing it, now you don't know what to say. And then the last thing is being able to refer. Who provides the support, who provides the assistance so this person can get the help that they need. And we do this with friends and family. Our top 5 resources or referrals that people cite is friends and family. That's one of them. Police is another, social service agencies. But we know that friends and family are referring to the Houston Area Women's Center because they're the ones who are seeing that this might be happening to somebody that they care about. And so we want them to be able to know how to recognize, how to respond to it, and then how to refer.
So what do you say to a family member who sees this happening?
So one of the things that we say is that, once you recognize, oh yeah, this person is being abused, and maybe it's not even any physical violence, but you can say to somebody, I noticed that, your husband doesn't allow you to call your friends or your family. I noticed that, he might call you some names, or you seem very withdrawn. And so one of the things that you could say is that I want you to know that this is not your fault. I want you to be safe, and here's a number that you can call so that they can help you. I support you. As Pam indicated, this is non-judgmental support, because a lot of times what happens is that it could sound like, why are you in that relationship? Why don't you just get out?
Right.
If it was me, I would be getting out like right now. And so I think that's not what we want to say to a survivor, because
and it's not always that easy.
Absolutely.
People think, oh, well, if it was me, I just walk out the door, hit somebody there with a frying pan or something. And we say this, but it's not always that easy.
No, it's not. But we do know that women go back. Women go back, sometimes up to 7 times.
Why? Why do they go back?
There's a variety of reasons. There are barriers that prohibit them from leaving that situation. When you think about emotional support, sometimes they feel as though they don't have that. Sometimes, as Sonia said, it's that financial piece, that financial independence. Sometimes you feel as though you cannot go on without that individual person, and so that keeps you going back to that relationship. The person may also feel that, well, this happens to me, this may be just normal. This may be a normal behavior, and I accept that, so I continue to go back to that relationship.
Wow.
I think the other thing too is that there's love there, right? I mean, you fell in love with this person, and so if this person tells you time and time again, listen, I'm not going to do this anymore, I love you, just because whenever you do this and this, then it kind of just makes me angry, and then I do it and I lose control. But I'm not going to do it anymore. I love you and I want to stay. I want to stay with you, and so sometimes they go back. But if you listen to the message, it's blaming that survivor, right? If you just didn't do this, then I wouldn't get angry and I wouldn't explode, or I wouldn't lose my control. And again, it's that person not taking responsibility. And we know that people can actually change, but they have to take responsibility for their behavior first.
Don't get me started.
And Dr. Montgomery, sometimes they're frightened. Sometimes women are frightened to leave a situation. They don't know what's going to happen.
I would be. Just hearing, listen, I'm kind of switching places here. I would be frightened. And when you were talking about love, if somebody is abusing you, whether it's verbally, economically, and I'm seeing that now, physically, it seems like you may be almost changing the definition of love over time for that person, making that person think that love is my hurting you. So you feel, well, when I hurt you, you're making me hurt you because I love you so much. And after a while, somebody starts believing that message.
Yes, they do.
And that's why what you all do is so important, because when they call that hotline, I think you begin to assess these things. You go down the line on this. Wow. I'm going to talk about abuse. And I want to go a little bit further. Matter of fact, you can give me a call at 713-313-4354. This subject, of course, shakes us all. We're hearing it in the news. And you can text us a question, or you can call in a question, or just call in. 713-313-4354. See you on the other side of space. KTSU 90.9 FM, your community station. Ladies.
This is good.
You all are very good with this.
The Shift with Ed Montgomery will be
checking
right
people are
back on your
texting
number
me
one
and
source for jazz and more on
they let me know
KTSU
I'm
90.9,
or
your
talking too
community
much,
station,
and let me
the
know all
heart
those things. But
and
you
soul
guys
of
they say you all
Houston.
are excellent. So
Supporting KTSU programming is the Houston Health Department, announcing
they're listening today, aren't they, Donna?
which stands for Get Yourself
Donna
Tested
Lee?
and
Yeah,
Treated
she's
for
got her
STD
headphones
and
on.
HIV. The Health Department is conducting risk assessments,
I like the
a component of STD
Okay, we
and
go-
HIV
this,
prevention. The campaign's motto is Know Your Status. Get tested, get treated. For more information on who should be tested and when, the number is 832-393-5010
Where would you like to go next?
or www.pennshouston.org.
Hi, this is your radio pastor, Reverend Ricky Williams, inviting you to join me on Sunday morning from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. for the Sunday morning worship drive on your
Okay,
community
we're
radio
gonna talk
station,
about this.
KTSU.
Our local community.
Join in on the conversation.
Okay.
Call
think the other thing is, like, if you want to
713-313-4354. That's
The most impacted,
713-313-4355.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get to.
Welcome to
I'm back. You're listening to The Shift, and we're talking to two experts from the Houston Area Women's Center, and we're talking about abuse. We're talking about domestic violence. We're talking about emotionally going through these kind of things, and how do you get out of these kind of things. By the way, is there a phone number that people can call, that women can call?
Absolutely.
What is that number?
We have a domestic violence line. It's 713-528-2121.
Say it again.
713-528-2121. And our sexual assault line is 713-528-7273. Again, 713-528-7273.
Oh, you becoming that radio personality over there, Pam. You sounding real good giving that number twice.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365.
Wow. That's and that's going on
Yes, sir.
all the time. In other
All
words,
the time. All the time.
Tell me about, when we talk about sexual abuse, tell me about the age. Ages are we talking?
So we know that the sexual abuse impacts everyone, and I think that that's an important message, is that it impacts men, it impacts women, it impacts children, boys and girls. And the statistic that we use is 1 out of every 3 women, 1 out of every 4 girls, and 1 out of every 6 to 7 men and boys will be sexually abused. And I think that that's important. So it crosses all ages, and we see them at the Houston Area Women's Center. But we know that there's an age group that it seems to be the highest in, and that's between the ages of 15 to 35. A lot of times it's when it's, dating is happening, so teen dating violence and including sexual abuse may happen in that age group. At the Houston Area Women's Center, the average age of an adult survivor is about 36.
That's young. And I didn't want to get into too many psychological questions because these become very tough. But when people are impacted by these things, it seems that some people seem to just kind of blow it off and say, "Oh, it didn't bother. I knew about this happened in my life 20 years ago, and it didn't bother me." But somebody experienced it, and it's something that they seem to live with on a consistent basis. Do you see that, or?
Oh, absolutely. We have survivors that are coming to the Houston Area Women's Center for the very first time because they were sexually assaulted. We have survivors who have been abused since the time that they were children, and then they've been abused again in a relationship, whether it's sexual abuse or domestic violence. And so we see that the trauma happens over and over and over again. And so what we know is that survivors are pretty resilient, and they're able to cope with a lot of the trauma, but there comes a point where they're not able to cope, like in healthy ways. And so sometimes then unhealthy ways of coping are being utilized, and it could be maybe turning to drugs or turning to alcohol because it's a way for them to cope and to get rid of the feelings that they're feeling as a result of the trauma. Sexual assault and domestic violence are very traumatic experiences, that someone is having. One of the things that happens is that because it's so very underreported and people don't come forward, then they learn to live with it. Then they begin to think that they can move on, with their lives. And so at the Houston Area Women's Center, what we want to say is that you're not alone. This is not your fault. Come and talk to someone, even if it's on the hotline, on the phone. You don't ever have to come in. You can be on the phone because we want to help you heal. We want to help you through this process. There's nothing wrong with you. You're having reactions to something that is traumatic, and the reactions are normal. And a lot of times what happens is that people think that somehow there's some kind of stigma around, getting counseling or getting therapy. And so what we want people to know is that this is a traumatic event that has happened, and you're having normal reactions to it. And we want to be there for you. We want to support you.
I think, especially in our communities, we have a tendency to, there's nothing wrong. I don't want to be looked at as if I'm, some type of molester or I'm crazy. And these are the words that people have a tendency to use, unfortunately. But I have a lot of male listeners, and they call in all the time. And are there groups, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the men that come to these groups are involved in this, but do you get the opportunity to talk to a lot of men? Would men show up? Do men show up?
As victims or
as victims
No, not as victims. As just awareness to learn about how to talk to a woman, how to handle things. In other words, to stop getting so geared up and angry. Do men come?
We do have men that come, but we also have community partners that we work with in the community. AFDA is one of our community partners that we partner with, and they provide additional services around men that are in situations like we are in, as well as making sure that they have that awareness around domestic violence and sexual assault. And I believe, Sonia, correct me if I'm wrong, we have a relationship that has been with AFDA for some time now.
So AFDA, just to clarify, is aid to victims of domestic abuse. And so what they do is they actually have a batterer intervention program. So if you believe that maybe you're doing some of these things, or your behavior sounds like maybe you're being abusive, I mean, you can call AFDA and ask for additional information about what domestic violence is, if this is something that you perhaps is doing. But the other way that we provide that education is we do it in schools. So the education that we provide is for boys and girls who are in middle school and in high school and then in college. So we want to talk about what domestic violence is. We want to talk about those dynamics, and those are important things to talk about.
While they're young, and so they have a different pattern of behavior.
Absolutely. But we also want to talk about, what contributes to abusive behavior, and we want to have that dialogue more with these teens and these young people, who are perhaps at the university or in colleges, because what we want to do is change behavior, right? So what we want is to stop victims from there be victims, and then we want to stop perpetrators. So we want to do those two things, and the only way that we can get there is through prevention. We also do a lot of education in the community to anyone who will listen to us about what domestic violence is, because it's important that we all learn what domestic violence and sexual abuse is in its dynamics.
I've got a question. Is it possible to tell when a woman is going into a relationship, brand new relationship? She just met somebody, maybe online or whatever. Are there any signs? Is there any way you can tell that this person might? I need to talk to this person a little bit longer. Maybe I don't need to, meet them after 2 times of seeing them online or whatever, because it's something. I see red flags. Are there red flags that pop up?
One of the things that we always talk about, and especially youth, are what is a healthy relationship, and what does a healthy relationship look like? So one of the things that we always talk about is this whole idea of jealousy, right? And so jealousy, for a lot of teens, is, my boyfriend was really jealous, so he must really like me a whole lot. And so that's a sign that this person is not in a healthy relationship. Jealousy is not love. Jealousy is not healthy. Jealousy is potentially violent, because jealousy leads to isolation. And so that's an important thing, to talk about. Perhaps,
well, that's a good one. If you're a little bit too jealous over there, if you a little bit, and you're saying, "Oh, I love you, but I just don't want you around anybody else." That little jealousy, or we got to be a little careful about that. Keep your eye open.
But sometimes girls really think that is okay, that they feel like, wow, he really does like me because he's jealous. But that is a sign, and that's one of the norms that we have to try to kind of dissect as we go through giving our sessions to the youth, is really helping them dissect what does that mean when a young man or says that I'm jealous. How do you begin to kind of internalize that for yourself, so you know what jealousy is and what it's not. So by doing that, by going through, as Sonia says, doing these prevention programs in the middle schools and high schools, it helps to break those norms, to kind of really help those youth realize that they may not be in a healthy relationship, that they may need to get away from that person.
It's kind of like you see these things, and of course in movies and the generation we live in, if somebody says, "You just made me so jealous," and then smash their hand through a wall or something, it's like, maybe I need to rethink this thing while I can get out with my life.
Exactly.
So, what's another little red flag?
Punching the wall.
Yeah, punching the wall is another red flag. Yeah, that's the violence part of it. Trying to break that cycle of violence is important, because that is a sign. Violence in a relationship is not healthy, and so you want to make sure that if you're seeing something like that, even if he or she is just having a tense moment where they get so enraged, that's also a sign. So you want to make sure that you're being able to read those signs.
Sooner or later, if they're punching on a wall or a door or something, sooner or later it seems like it might get to you, and that's one thing you want to keep your mind and be aware of those kind of things.
Dr. Ed, we have a text message.
Yes, Donna, what is it?
What do you do when you have helped someone to get away from a domestic violence situation, only for them to voluntarily keep going back to it?
Lady. You got it. I think you already answered it, but they asked it again.
So I think one of the things that we know about domestic violence is that, it doesn't happen from one day to the next. So somebody is in a situation where somebody has been controlling and manipulating that situation. And so as a friend or family member, sometimes it can get frustrating, right, that somebody keeps going back. But it's important to always continue to be non-judgmental and to continue to support that person, as they need you. And so while it may feel, very frustrating that a person keeps going back, one of the things that we always say is that we're going to be here for you. We're going to continue to support you and continue to be non-judgmental. At the Houston Area Women's Center, we know that people call our hotline multiple times, or they come to our shelter multiple times, and we always say, when they're leaving and we safety plan with them, you're always welcome back, because we know that that dynamic is there.
Because you did say it takes what? Was it maybe something 7 times?
Yes.
It takes
Up to
about
7 times.
It takes at least 7 times.
Dr.
Yes.
Ed, let me ask this one question, because I'm not on mic, so you can barely hear me.
Okay. So
But when you have a friend who is going through that and you're helping your friend, and to see them keep going back, that hurts very deeply for you, because you know the pain. You're with that person. So, and I'm sure this person who made that text is, how do I keep helping my friend when they keep hurting me too?
Yeah, and Donna, if you couldn't hear what she says, how do you keep helping my friend because it's hurting me? I think that if you're going to help somebody, just like they have been saying, you've got to help that person. You got to decide, I'm going to walk with this person all the way through it. And I think that's what the Houston Area Women's Center does. They walk with you all the way through, no matter what. No?
Absolutely. As we've said, when people call the hotline, they may be calling 2 and 3 and even 4 times, and sometimes even more. But when they do that, the person that is there to support them, they really need to feel like they are there for that individual. It is their choice to go back and leave, and go back and leave. That's a choice that they're making. But the most important thing is that you're there, non-judgmental, making sure that you're supporting that individual, whether they decide if they want to go back or not, and not judging them for that, because that's one of the things that makes that person feel like, I don't have the support because I'm being judged. But there are so many other things that occur that maybe she is not sharing, that person could be feeling or being in that situation, that they may not be sharing everything that's going on in that relationship. So there may be things that the friend doesn't even know that's going on in that relationship, that friend may not choose to share.
Let me ask a question, and we're getting toward the end of our show, but my audience, I know they want me to ask something. What is harassment? What is it if when we hear of harassment, what is harassment? Because
So harassment can take various forms, right? It can be harassment in the workplace. It could be harassment in the schools. It could be harassment, after you leave a relationship. One of the things that is important to talk about when we talk about harassment is that the most dangerous time is when somebody leaves a domestic violence situation. And so many of the survivors that we see, the overwhelming majority of them are being stalked by the abuser once they left them, and it becomes more dangerous. In the state of Texas, 136 women lost their lives. Harris County leads the pack at 29 of people who have died as a result of domestic violence. And that's the continuum. So when somebody leaves and decides to leave a violent situation, it becomes the most dangerous time, and they're more likely to get killed by that, abuser. And if we talk about specifically in the African American community, African American women make up about 8% of the population. Yet they make up 22% of the people who have been killed due to domestic violence.
Hold on.
And so that says a lot.
I just went. I didn't care about that break. I just went right on past that break. That you on that break. Listen, because I'm going to answer that question when I come back to the other side of this, and that is stalking. And what do you do when you're finding out after you've left that situation? This person is constantly calling you or driving by your house, and I'll be right back after this, okay? All right.
POs.
The Shift with Ed Montgomery will be right back on your number one source for jazz and more on KTSU 90.9, your community station, the heart.
Well, I'm really listening.
This is not something you can call in.
Supporting your community
No.
station, KTSU, is patient
amazing.
home healthcare services.
Ladies, you all are giving me
Home
these
health
questions.
supervisors
We didn't even get into the
to the
harassment.
elderly, disabled, and chronically ill who
But then you
require
went into
supportive
stalking, which is
care.
perfect.
Patient Recovery Home Health Care
Oh, my
is a
goodness.
personal assistance.
See, this is a two-show.
They are
This is
located
almost a
at
two-show.
505 North Sam Houston Parkway East, Suite 680. For more information for loved ones and others in need of home care, the number is
Is there anything,
281-447-1010.
tell me whatever you want to get out,
The number for
because
Patient Recovery Health
any
Care
particular
is
thing you really want to get out.
281-447-1010.
You want to say?
Hey, if you missed the
I
segment,
think that
it's okay.
this
You
is
can hear the
what we're
podcast
talking
online
about.
at
All of us that talk about what we need to talk
ktsu.radio.com.
about, and their help is available. Many survivors who are in the don't ask for help.
Yeah, they don't.
Hold on, you're going to say that. Listen, we were talking off the air, and one of the things was brought out about what happens in the African American community. What were you telling me?
So what I was saying is that one of the important messages here is to know for any community, but in particular for the African American community, is that it's a very underreported crime, both sexual assault and domestic violence. That help because people are afraid to report. People are fearful that perhaps they're not going to be believed, that somehow this is their fault. Then there's whole issue around race and police. And so if I'm an African American woman whose partner is beating them up, and I turn them over to the police, and the police has historically been racist, then it's harder for me to turn somebody over, to the police because of how I feel that they may going to be treated, within that police department.
Oh, and quite possibly how that man will look at that woman after he gets out of jail.
Absolutely. Retaliation is very real. I think the other thing is, what the community is going to think of me now that I've reported, this to the police. Whether you report to the police or not, it's important to know that help is available. This is not your fault. The Houston Area Women's Center is there to provide that support for anyone who is interested in either reporting. We can walk you and navigate you through that process. We know that the Houston Police Department, now has a lot of advocates in place, who will help you through that process. And so we want you to know that help is available. And that's an important message to take away.
So that's why it's important to call that Houston Area Women's Center, is because of all these little bitty, the red flags, the little nuances that we don't know how these things work. You have to call somebody that knows how to navigate these things.
Absolutely. As I said, they're 24/7, 365, and that number is 713-528-2121 for domestic violence and 713-528-7273 for sexual assault.
And that's coming right from my co-host for today, Ham over there. She's doing good. And Sonia, this is the seriousness, and we laugh and we're not joking, because this subject is so serious. And we've talked about the harassment. And by the way, what do you do when somebody is stalking? What do you do? Do you call the police or?
So one thing that we know that happens in domestic violence, again, going back to the most dangerous time is when somebody leaves. We know that the harassment and stalking does not stop. And so when we look at that 136 women who have died in the state of Texas, in those 29, the overwhelming majority are either a current partner or spouse. It could be an ex-girlfriend, it could be a live-in boyfriend, and so it's somebody that that person probably has left. And so in those types of cases, that stalking may increase. So a protective order through the district attorney's office, or
so that's the first thing they need to do, is get some kind of protective order, put it on record.
Yes, the protective order is a tool that can be used for safety, and so the district attorney will do that for free, and it's a civil order, but it's criminally enforceable, and that's important.
So you can call you can call the Houston Area Women's Center. They'll tell you how to do it.
Absolutely. Aid to victims of domestic abuse will also do protective orders. And so it's a tool. Now, that goes hand in hand with safety planning, lethality assessment. Those are all important things, to think about whenever you're leaving a violent situation. But stalking is something that happens very, very frequently when somebody's leaving a violent situation, or to keep somebody in that situation.
And I'm gonna put this in there. Do you think it's a good idea for women to have their own little bank account somewhere with their own money?
That's what we call financial independence.
That's what we call.
It's important for women.
Because I went back to the economic thing, especially if somebody's harassing you or
Correct.
stalking you.
Correct.
You got to have some money to be able, to get away or things of that sort.
So one of the things that we talk about with survivors is safety planning and individual safety plans. That could be part of a safety plan, that perhaps you have a bank account, or you're giving money to your friend to save for you, so you may need it for an emergency. But there's all kinds of things that individual can do around planning for safety. So safety planning is very important, but so is lethality. Our hotline is there 24 hours a day?
Say that hotline number one more time.
713-528-2121 for domestic violence and 713-528-7273 for sexual assault.
Listen, I don't want to let go of this conversation, but my music is telling me I got to let go because my time is up, and KTSU won't let me go any further on this subject. So,
if I can say thank you so very much, Dr. Ed, for allowing us to have the dialogue around domestic violence and sexual assault today. It's important that we all know that we can break the cycle of violence if we just take a moment to learn about it, to talk about it, and to end it.
And you talk about change, so let's change the silence.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. And you all keep letting us know that you heard this show. I want to put it out and let people know that this was a great show today so that we can keep this conversation going on and on and on and on and on. Listen, ladies, those of you that are listening, don't get discouraged. Just like I tell you every week, it's time to put some music on, put on your dancing shoes, and get by yourself and dance for a little while and let yourself know that you are unique, you are special, and then once you know who you are, and you're going to know how to get out of your situation. Listen, we've heard today, you got help. Join us next week right here on The Shift, where we're going to a whole nother level. Let me know that you liked it, okay? Thank you so much right here on KTSU 90.9 FM, your community station. Bye-bye. Talk to you next week. Ladies, did you enjoy yourselves?
Yes, it was good.
You all. This was I think it's my best show here. I think this the best show.
You know what?
I think this the best show here.
The information that came out in this short hour,
yes,
was mind blowing. Totally mind blowing.
I think they were listening today. Oh, because our callers are always calling in.
Yeah, they do. They call it that. But
they don't talk about everything. Today, not today. They were listening today.
It's because you had yes. Oh my gosh. The statistics.
Yes.
Oh, you blew me away with that one. Really?
Yes.
That many?
Oh my God.
It's